For 26 days now, the Indian state of Manipur is on the edge. After the first violent clashes on the 3rd of May between two indigenous groups, there were days of uneasy calm. But as recently as yesterday, there are reports of violence flaring up again. The Chief Minister of Manipur, Biren Singh, says 33 terrorists have been killed as the army goes about de-arming villages. In the midst of all of this, tensions continue to simmer. In the latest, Home Minister Amit Shah has arrived in Manipur for a 3-day visit to settle the tensions. But what is the root cause of all this violence that has killed over 60 people, left thousands of buildings destroyed and several hundreds injured? Even more importantly, why is there no solution in sight 26 days later? Let's start at the beginning. On April 14th this year, the Manipur High Court directed the state government to recommend to the centre that the Meitei community be given scheduled tribe status. This order served to inflame simmering tensions between the Meitei and Kuki communities. On the 3rd of May, a march by the All Tribal Students' Union turned violent and Meitei community members were attacked. What followed was days of retribution and counter-retribution with wide-scale destruction of lives, property and injuries. The government has responded by cracking down on those plotting violence. Villagers are being searched, but it's important to understand the origins of the issue. In simple terms, it boils down to a tussle for land and dominance. The Meitei community is the dominant majority in the state, accounting for about 60% of the population, but are restricted to about 10% of the land in the valley. The Kukis and other tribals, meanwhile, account for about 40% of the population and occupy 90% of the land, which is in the hills. But it's the 10% land in the valley that has more development and 40 out of the 60 assembly seats in the state. In this backdrop, the Meitei community has been asking for recognition as scheduled tribe for at least the last decade. The reason is that it will allow this community to acquire land in the hills that is currently reserved only for tribal communities. Add to this mix different religions followed by both sides, different ethnicities, allegations of illegal immigration and drug running. In this tinderbox, a spark has now been lit, with no clear solution so far. The question is, why was this situation allowed to fester to this extent when legacy cultural fissures are well known? Once the violence did begin, was it handled in the right manner? And 26 days later, why is there no clear path to peace? Now, to speak on some of these issues, I'm joined today by B.L. Vora, former Home Secretary of Manipur, Rajat Sethi, former advisor, Chief Minister of Manipur, Patricia Mukhi, editor of the Shillong Times, joins us on the show, and I'm speaking with Bina Lakshmi Nepram, who's an activist and founder director of the Manipur Women Guns Survivors Network. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us. Rajat Sethi, let me begin with your take on what's happened. And I want to start by saying that we're addressing an audience today which might not understand the intricacies of the backdrop of these clashes between the two communities, why this has been happening. So let's start at the beginning. Was this always a very tense situation?
So Tamanna, you are right. It's a complex issue. Unlike other states in the other parts of our nation, this society, Manipuri society, is not a homogeneous monolith. Unlike, say, UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, where you have one dominant community and a few minorities, this has three largely equal groups, with Meiteis, of course, greater in number than the Meiteis, than the Kukis and the Nagas. But essentially, this is a non-homogeneous, highly diverse state wherein you have 30 plus big and small tribes and the non-tribes and the Muslim Pangals living together in a very, very small area. 90%, as you said, is reserved, is protected by Constitution's Article 371C, wherein only the tribals can reside. This thought came in through several deliberations that the Meitei community also deserve an ST status. And we live in a democratic setup wherein any community can raise a claim to being being included into the ST sort of shortlist. The problem here is that as soon as this happened and High Court sort of tried to initiate the process, a violent reaction came in from the tribal communities who were dead against the idea that Meiteis, if they get the ST status, they will also be able to acquire land in the hill areas. That thought perhaps was too scary for them. And there were retaliations. As you said, it's a tinderbox. It's in a very classic, in an engineering term, it is called an unstable equilibrium. You tip it and it will all fall apart. The problem is that for the past 60, 70 years, right from the day Manipur was brought into the Indian Dominion in 1949, ever since the promises that were given to the Meitei community, and then the influx that kept happening from Myanmar, which bolstered the so-called Kuki community, which is largely speaking the Kuki, Chin, and Zo community. It all came together for a very long period of time. Meitei community kept shrinking, both in proportion of population as well as the land that they could potentially live on. So these two things developed insecurities among the Meiteis.
Right.
Nagas were largely, had closer affinity with the bigger Naga groups based out of Nagaland. Kukis had bigger loyalty towards the Zo community, which dominates the Mizoram state. Hence the problem. Now, we know that High Court's order started the first wave of violence, but your important point is that why did this second wave of violence for the past 3 days unleash?
Right.
The reason is that the Home Minister, Amit Shah ji, was scheduled to visit the state. A lot of Kuki-based terror outfits, there are 10 such groups, who saw this as an opportunity that the Honorable Home Minister might ask them to reinitiate the Sioux operation. They wanted to specifically target one community, and they went on to a rampage. They were sitting on hilltops, and with their snipers, they were targeting communities and villages of Meiteis in the valley. And that unleashed the recent, past 2-3 days of violence. More than what I'm hearing in Kakching district alone, 3,000 Meitei families have been displaced. 300 Kuki families have also been displaced, and we are seeing this spate of violence suddenly going up. And we also saw Kuki militants being targeted by the
here is where things get blurred. Who are the militants? Who are the protesters? Which side started the violence? Who reciprocated? In a very broad sense, once you have, like you said, a tinderbox lit, everything becomes a little fuzzy. But I want to go back and, I think it's very important to understand the background of what is happening in a place if you want to understand a story, which is why I'm going to come to Mr. B.L. Vora now. Is this new, that violence has broken out between the Meitei community and the Kuki community, or the Kuki community and the Naga community? This has happened before, isn't it?
It has happened, but not at such a large scale. Now see, as Mr. Rajat Sethi said, Manipur has 3 major communities: Nagas, Kukis and Meiteis. So it's difficult to administer such a state. Things were all right for quite a long time. But yes, there have been insurgent groups. We had among Nagas, we had many among Meiteis, but we didn't have earlier among Kukis. Now, this is, in a way, a recent phenomenon. Recent also would mean quite some time now. See, all the communities, lovely communities, they have their aspirations and they all have their apprehensions. Now, it's very necessary to keep a tab on both their aspirations and apprehensions. Now, as Meiteis have been demanding ST status for a long time, I think they got OBC status also much later. So this was a legitimate demand on their part, whereas Kukis thought, as has been mentioned already, about land or even about jobs. I think a sharp eye should have been kept. So I think the intelligence failed, political parties played political games, the political pragmatism at the part of the Chief Minister, that also failed, administration failed. and of course citizens also. And now the way they took away weapons, more than 1,000 weapons from police have been taken away now. And there's many weapons, and there are people even on the international level who would like India to have problems. So I think that when the first wave was there, let us agree for a moment that they were caught unawares, but how about the second wave? To say that just because Home Minister is coming and they wanted to show, then where was the administration? Where was the police?
Right.
Where was the state government? They should have nipped it in the bud. So this is where I think the failure has been, apart from, as I said, playing political games and all that. And so many groups, by the dozens you have everywhere. Even Metis even today have insurgent groups. Nagas, of course, have well-known insurgent groups. And I think this thing also, see, we had one Naga as a chief minister for a very, very long time in Manipur. If you heard the name Rishan Keshing, he was member of the first Lok Sabha also. It's a statesman to the core. And he was able to keep all the communities together. So somehow I think this is stuck with the present CM, which is unfortunate. And I know it's not that. And there have been so many Methi chief ministers also. So I think that everyone has failed in a way. And I think judiciary also should have been cautious. I mean, not saying, I think their order was misread in a way. They said the state government should consider and recommend. So that wording, I think, created a lot of confusion.
Even
I
so,
think everybody is to
even
blame,
so,
but
if
having
you
said
think
that,
about it, Mr. Vora, and we traced the whole timeline. The court order which said please recommend to the center to include them in ST, because the center has to do it, was
Consider
on
and
the
recommend.
14th. The first lot of violence, first incident was 3rd of May. So, several days, at least 2 weeks later. I want to bring Patricia Mukhi in on this point. Were there lapses which allowed the violence to flare? And the fact that it has not been brought under control even 26 days later. What do you make of that?
See, let us admit that there is a complete failure of the state here. There is a collapse of the law and order machinery because you had this all Manipur tribal students procession, which I'm told numbered about 60,000 people. I mean, when the situation is already so fragile, how do you allow such a procession to happen? And then you can control the whole situation thereafter. To me, it appears that there is now a huge divide that will be very, very difficult to bridge. And with those 10 Kuki MLAs asking for a separate administrative unit, I don't know how you can bring back the communities together. There is such a mistrust, and you can see the complete collapse of civil society also. You don't see any civil society group coming forward to bring the two warring communities together just to start a dialogue. And I think here the trigger is the chief minister himself and the kind of language he uses to term those who have been killed. Yesterday he said 40 terrorists were killed. Then it became 37. Then it became, the numbers were also very unsure. Now you are the chief minister of the entire state of Manipur, not of just one community. And I think it's important to look at the entire population as your people, and that, you have to address their concerns. You can't just belittle their concerns and then stand, to support one community only on the ST status. The ST status, of course, has a process. And so now when you look at the situation, it's completely militarized. You don't know whether there is a urgency sort of going on counterinsurgency step that has been taken. To me, it would appear that from day one, when the whole conflict flared up, the chief minister should have just stepped down, and because he has been the trigger here. And when we go back to the history of Manipur, let's remember that Manipur had presidents rule for 10 times, and it went on for the entire 10 times that it was under president's rule was some 2,337 days. So if for smaller reasons, for not very important reasons such as this is large scale violence, you can have president's rule, why not this time? These are questions that are very troubling because the trust deficit is so huge, the ethnic divide has just widened, and there is no, you don't see any outreach by anyone to bring the communities together at this point.
So, I think an important point there, and it sounds quite foreboding when Patricia says that can this gap be bridged after this round of violence? Ms. Nepram, what is your view? Can this gap be bridged? Because these communities have been living together for, several decades. They have been living together, whether it is uncomfortable today or not.
Absolutely. We have a very beautiful saying in Sanskrit that the world is one global family. The world is becoming globalized, and our identities, instead of being a joy, a source of diversity to celebrate, it's being weaponized. I just said this an hour ago at Rashid's program. Every community, whether it is in Manipur or whether it's in Meghalaya, every community has diverse populations. But this time, the identities of different communities have been weaponized. And this is not the first time in the northeast of India. I did my college in Shillong. In Shillong, there were huge communal riots which happened. And what we're seeing in Manipur today is also absolutely shocking. It has shattered us, but we are being resilient. And I would like to just rectify what Kong Pat, whom I deeply respect, said, that yes, the society is divided, but Manipur is not the first time clashes have happened in Manipur. In 1992, we had the Kuki Naga clash, where thousands and hundreds of people were killed and displaced. We had the Meitei and the Pangal clash too. We had the Paite and the Kuki clash too. So the northeast of India, and particularly Manipur and across, have been seeing these. So, and we have the resilience in us. And it's also wrong to say that civil societies has broke down. I have been in touch with Kuki mothers. We have issued a northeast of India peace appeal. We have formed mothers' peace committees in different areas. Because again, as I mentioned, the issue of what is happening in Manipur is a question of how our identities have been weaponized, huge arms influx. Plus, let us not forget that the northeast of India share 1,642 kilometers with Burma, where for the last 2 years, there have been military crackdown on Burma, and over 70,000 communities from Burma have crossed over to 2 states, Manipur and in Mizoram, where they are staying in hundreds of camps.
Right.
I also, as Kongpet said, I would also like to say that failure is not just of the state machinery, but I also call upon the central government to ensure that if there are refugees who are coming to India, and India has a very long history of, it's a country which has respected and welcomed people. India has to work with the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees.
All that is fine. Why hasn't it happened so far is the question. You're seeing the latest visuals, by the way, just for our viewers, of Home Minister Amit Shah chairing a high-level meeting on the whole Manipur issue. This is his first visit since those clashes broke out. And there are reports that he will be speaking with representatives of both the communities. Patricia, I just want you to respond to some of the points that were made by Ms. Nepram, that these are communities that have lived together and a way should be found. What is the solution in your view?
Living together doesn't necessarily mean that you do not have a grouse against, your neighbor or whatever. So the thing to do is that you have to bring in some amount of justice and equity. And none of the states in the region have a land use policy. So you do anything with your forest land, you do anything anywhere, you build on agricultural land. And because land is such a sort of a tenuous problem in the region, particularly in Manipur. I mean, in so many years, some amount of work should have been undertaken to ensure that nobody is being deprived of their rightful share of land for building at least a home. Because if you look at the state of Manipur today, the people from the hills can buy land in the valley, and that valley is already very, very, you know, under so much pressure. But the valley people cannot buy land in the hills, so there's bound to be resentment there, and these resentments should have been resolved over the years through some policy, some kind of strategic decision. But it has just been left to fester. Every chief minister has just allowed this trouble to fester, and this to me is at the root of the matter. It is land which is at the root of the matter.
Absolutely. Land is at the root of the matter, but we also have to look at the nuances of what is happening here. Rajat Sethi, let me come back to you. So land is one part of it. This move to, instead of just fixing the issue of access to land, but turning it into an access to ST status, seems to have triggered this fresh wave of violence. Then there are reports of crackdowns on poppy cultivation of the Kuki community, which has then simmered tensions as well. A drive against illegal infiltration and immigration. So all of this is turned into sort of a festering situation. What do you think would have been done better in terms of governance? Because today, at this point, Chief Minister Biren Singh is the one who needs to answer.
Well, I think he will have to answer, and elections possibly is the best way to answer in a democratic setup. Do you not do war on drugs? Or do you not go after illegal migrants coming into the country? Or do you not stop Aadhaar shops which have opened right at the border between India and Myanmar, wherein Aadhaar cards are being issued ad nauseum? Do you not crack down on passports being issued in the Imphal Valley, where disproportionate number of passports are being issued to one community alone? There have been far too many things where administration...
No, I'm sorry, 1 minute. Can I just ask you something? Passports are issued by a central agency. So who is issuing passports in the Imphal Valley? Can you just clarify that for us?
Tamanna ji, there are passport offices which require documentation like the Aadhaar documentation.
So you're saying fake documentation is being put together?
Exactly. Allow me to finish my point. Please have the patience. Not just that, reserved forests were being occupied, and suddenly overnight villages used to come up. Villages which constituted no more than 3 to 4 huts were declared as ancestral villages, and reserved forest was being taken up. Patricia ji raised an important point around hills, but reserved forests have always had very clear regulations in place. But all of this, then should the administration not go out and do surveys of what reserved forests are there and which have been illegally occupied? So over the past, see, what has happened is in the second regime of the BJP government there was firm mandate, and the central government was that you need to stop the menace of illegal drugs, because these drugs do not just stop in Manipur. It goes all the way till Punjab, all the way till Maharashtra and Mumbai.
I think you're going off track, Rajat Sethi. No one is saying, please, let drugs flourish and let illegality flourish. I think we're missing the point if that's the argument you're making this evening. No one is saying let illegality flourish. The question I'm asking, let me just redirect. The question I'm asking is that was the situation mishandled in a state where, as you explained, it is such a fragile balance?
Can I come in here, please? Hello?
Yes. Yes.
Can I come in here?
Yes, Patricia. Yes.
Now I can't hear you. See, I think it's also very important for the central government to relook at the suspension of operation agreements. Why are the arms available so freely? Everyone has a gun. Everyone has an AK. How is this allowed to happen? When you arm people to the teeth, this is bound to happen. You know, a communal clash will result in killings of. We had, as Bina Lakshmi Nepram said, in 1979, we also in Meghalaya had a huge communal carnage, but there were no guns. You know, fortunately, if there were guns at that time, if people had guns, if guns could come in as freely as they do in Manipur, things would have gone really out of control. So it's important for the central government now to take a look at all these treaties that it has signed with these militant outfits to ensure that nobody has a handle on the guns. All these weapons should be kept in a place that is well designated and which is out of bounds. And we have to also question this. How is it that the extremist outfits from the valley were able to raid a police training center and take away arms from there? The quarrel is on both sides, and we shouldn't be taking sides over here. So if there are extremists in the hills, there are extremists in the valleys also who have been very, very actively, doing things and taking on even the state authorities, the armed forces. And what surprised me was that 3 people from the Rapid Action Force were arrested for trying to set alight a beef shop belonging to a Pangal Meitei. I mean, how can you expect a state force to get into this whole complex situation and take sides like that?
Okay. Rajat, your response to that, because today the charge is that there was misgovernance. That's something Mr. Vora said as well. And then we lost his audio. But that's something he alluded to as well. That there was misgovernance in a situation where the backdrop is well known.
See, Patricia ma'am is raising very pertinent points. Why is it that Manipur's population and its militant groups have access to automatic assault weapons? And the principal reason why Meghalaya doesn't have and Manipur has is the porous border with Myanmar. We know the state of affairs in Myanmar. We know how China influences a lot of insurgent activities, sponsors them, etc. And drug on top of it becomes the principal financer for all these arms to cross borders. And that is principal reason number 1 why Meitei is so armed society. And this is the reason. And today, if Amit Shah ji is there, I think his biggest challenge is to first ensure that the Kuki militants are back in the camps. SU agreements, the suspension of operation agreements, have been unilaterally withdrawn by the current state government because none of the Kuki militant groups were helping the state government control the eradication of poppy cultivation. This was the reason why SU arrangement was cancelled midway just a couple of months back. Once there is no suspension of operation, all the militant groups with their weapons, assault level weapons, were out among the villagers living life peacefully. And this is the reason why this violence has suddenly erupted. Because today, if there is another round of suspension of operations, they will have to give their weapons back to the state. They want to first unleash another wave of violence before they do that. This is the reason why for the past 3 days you are seeing violence in that state. And I think for going forward, if peaceful talks have to happen, there cannot be gun violence. Meitei community who have forcefully taken up arms from the police will have to return it back. There are more than 1,000 such weapons which are with the common Meitei people. They have to return it back. Kuki militants who have been protected and sheltered by the Kuki communities in their villages will have to give up and go back to the camps.
Rajat Sethi, who will implement all of this?
I think it's the Home Minister here.
Please.
He's there with all the agencies and
Exactly. The government has to do it. There's no argument over what has to be done. The question is why not? Yes, Ms. Nepram. Yes.
Yes. I would just like to say one thing very seriously. The fire that we are seeing in Manipur may spread to the entire Northeast. It may spread to the entire country. This for us is not just a state security issue, it's a national security issue. Because Manipur is the last bastion which is defending the borders of India from what is happening around. So I would like to say, as a Manipuri, I'm saying this, For us, our lives are shattered across communities, and we have to ensure that the policymakers, whoever they are, must ensure that the fire is doused. Otherwise, it is a national security issue. The reason is, as we mentioned, that currently what we haven't discussed here is because we are very close to Burma, and hundreds of thousands of 1.4 million Burmese are right now internally displaced, and many of them have come to Manipur and Mizoram particularly.
Yes,
And
that's
as
an
a result,
important aspect. That's an
Yeah.
important aspect. The strife in Myanmar has seen wave of immigrants coming, into these areas. So once again,
Yes. It also includes Tamanna. It also includes many of their armed fighters. Let me tell you very, very clearly that there is a national security issue, and the government of India have to look into it very carefully.
All right, the next few days is going to be crucial. Home Minister Amit Shah is in Manipur. We are seeing the latest visuals coming in from there, and we can hope for peace and quick resolution of this conflict at the earliest. I want to thank all of you for joining us today as we put the spotlight and the lens on what is not a black and white issue. And this kind of violence rarely is. There are many, many facets to it, and it needs a soft touch, a delicate touch to resolve some of these issues. Thank you so much to all of you. Some breaking news coming in that we're addressing this